This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The champion, welcome, Danny Batten.
Hey guys, I'm Sai and welcome. It's Sunday, it's fight night here on A.C.E Podcast Nation. It is the home of the Danny Batten Fight Show. This is episode number 95. We are rattling along towards the 100th episode, but tonight we'll be talking a massive weekend of combat sports. We'll of course be talking last night's heavyweight boxing a bit later on, as well as some MMA and UFC and whatnot, and another top guest from combat sports. But we are live, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, as always. A.C.E Podcast Nation, as usual, features top guests, expert analysts, and more. So please do give us a follow on social media, subscribe to the YouTube channel, click the bell for notifications. But if you prefer your podcasts in audio format, then get them at the Sports Social Podcast Network, the UK's first dedicated all sports podcast network. You'll find all the shows produced by A.C.E Podcast Nation there with their own little websites, including the Danny Batten Fight Show. All 95 episodes are there, featuring all sorts of guests and conversation. But let's get into it. Joining me as ever, former Cage Warriors champion, UK MMA legend. It is Mr. Daniel Batten. Welcome, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, good seeing you again, Si, and hello, all listeners. I'm looking forward to this week. This is going to be a good one tonight.
It's going to be fascinating. And we are joined by, in my opinion, one of the best commentators in combat sports. He is Cage Warriors official commentator. It is Mr. Brad Wharton. Welcome, my friend. How are you? Welcome back, I should say.
Yeah, I want to say, in my opinion as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great to be back on, guys. Great to be back on. Like you say, great weekend of fights as well. Looking forward to some good combat sports chat.
Yeah, insanity, mate. It was I got to say, I was not that, up until probably this week, I was not that bothered about Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder 3, because I felt like it had been quite comprehensive. So I wasn't sure how excited I was going to get about seeing the same thing again. But as the week went on, my excitement did raise a little bit. And I think rightly so, because what a fight. And I think apart from Deontay Wilder refusing to kind of shake his hand and stuff at the end, which I think is probably emotions and stuff, that took the edge off a little bit. But I thought he vastly came out of that looking better than he had either the first or the second fight, which is quite remarkable, really, when you think the way he floored Tyson Fury in one of the earlier fights. But I mean, Danny, very quickly, mate, how did you find the build up and everything to it? And were you excited about the third fight? And then obviously,
no, I wasn't that excited about it. I think I made my opinions clear on what I thought about how it's coming about that they're fighting a third time. I didn't agree with it, but my God, if you're ever going to have to watch people come up against each other 3 times in close succession, That's the kind of fight you want to see. It had me on the edge of my seat. I really enjoyed it, really enjoyed it. And, I've got utter respect for both of them before they, competed against each other for the third time, but even more so now after their performances on both parts. They both had to go through some adversity to get through, just to get through the whole fight. It is amazing. Really good.
I think, Brad, the thing to remember with Deontay Wilder is he could have got paid millions and just missed this fight. He didn't have to fight her. They would have happily paid him off so they could have gone ahead with the Fury and Joshua fight. And I think that says a lot about him from a personal point of view. One, about as a fighter, but also that he thought he could beat Tyson Fury.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously he thought he won the first fight, and he had a lot to say about what was going down around the time of the second fight. Changes in stuff behind the scenes and that. And he's obviously the kind of guy, and you get that with big hitters. They've got that belief that it just takes one shot, because with guys like Deontay Wilder, it often does take one shot. And we saw him landing a lot on Tyson Fury last night. So, he obviously had the confidence going in that, that second fight wasn't a true reflection of how they matched up. And like you say, credit to it for taking him. It's I imagine it's a very difficult decision to make, not to accept millions of dollars to just sit on the couch and wait and train and get ready for your chance. To be that adamant that you want to go back in with the guy who's considered the best heavyweight boxer in the world. You've got to have some phenomenal self-belief. And I think he showed that in the fight as well, to pick himself up off the canvas and drop Fury twice. The odds on, Fury was like minus 3,000 before he got dropped. And the odds completely flipped after that for the live betting. So just goes to show you how close he did come to finishing that fight. I don't think there's any need for a fourth anywhere down the line. Certainly not, for the next couple of years. And I think by that point, both guys will probably moved on. But what trilogy and the best fight of the three for me to
yeah, agreed.
Yeah, all three fights were different as well, which is not always the case, especially with heavyweight boxing. Like, they were all different in different sorts of ways. But I thought with Deontay Wilder as well, nobody has treated him like that in the boxing ring in all three fights, in fairness. Like, no one has bullied him around like that. No one has knocked him down, and no one has taken his punches like Tyson Fury did. Yet, like you say, he knocked down Tyson Fury twice last night. And obviously there's the famous one, which is, I got to say, is all the more enjoyable when you watch it with the Undertaker's music and commentary in the background when he rises up. No, it was good. It was really good. And then obviously we had a phenomenal, I thought it was really good, UFC Vegas last night. A couple of really good female fights on there. And also I think it was Tim Elliott fight was pretty good. A few decisions, but it was some good stuff. And I haven't even had a chance to watch any of the Cage Warriors Academy shows. Really looking forward to watching them as well. So it's going to be a busy week or busy couple of days. And obviously congratulations to our guest last week, Lloyd Germain, who continued his unbeaten professional record on Friday with another victory. And he's now 4-0. And I look forward to chatting to Lloyd again soon. But Danny, before we get into it and have a bit of a chat with Brad, you obviously had Tom Mearns fighting at the Cage Warriors Southeast Academy fight last night. And also our previous guest, Jack Eglin, picked up a victory with a rear naked choke. But tell us a bit about your experience with it. And Tom obviously picked up the title.
As usual, Tom's in an absolute war. But, the nice part was he actually listened a little bit to what was going on in the corner. Sometimes he's a bit of a loose cannon in there. Sometimes as cornermen, we are as much spectators as the spectators themselves. We don't seem to have any control of what they do. But he did make adjustments in there. He did stick to some game plans and modify the game plan as the rounds went on. Performed generally pretty good. You've got to remember, I'll always maintain this, he's fighting out of his weight. And this is through his choice right now during this time of his life. But I think all of the intentions are for him to go back down to featherweight, where I think he'd be woefully more effective. That he's a real thick set featherweight. I think he'll get back to those stoppages that we've seen him do in his early part of his career with both strikes and submissions. He's got the capabilities, he's got the skill set, he's got the martial art background and deep breathing to create those finishes again. But I just don't think he's going to create that very often at lightweight. But that said, You know, he's done fantastic. He's picked himself up a belt, and I think this belt is going to be doing a lot of healing of things that have happened with some of the close decisions that have gone against him, and some of the other difficulties he's had in his private life. I think this is going to do him the absolute world of good. And I think the starting point of that was that we got him to do a grappling tournament that he picked up gold in. And I think this has given him the taste for the martial art aspect and approach to MMA. So many people have this mentality of a fighter's approach. But just remember what MMA stands for. It's mixed martial arts, martial artists. And they're every bit as skillful as any other individual martial arts. It's just that they're rolling it all into one. So hats off to Tom for all that he's been through. I know other fighters have a big story of, you know, how they come about with their successes, but he's had a real rough ride, and this has been a great thing for him in his life. And I'm sure he'll look forward to defending it as soon as possible, as soon as he heals up, because he was pretty battered after it. His opponent was well tough.
Yeah, I saw his face. It was very busted up in the picture you had with him after. But
yeah.
In fairness to him, I think like when we spoke to him the last time, he was frustrated by, I think, a couple of close decisions on the Cage Warriors shows, and they were like out and out wars. And I think in bulk, off the top of my head, I think in the first instance was really close, could have gone either way. And I think maybe the second one, I think he was a bit unlucky. But I mean, you know, that's such is the way it goes, isn't it? With when it goes to the judges and stuff. But it's easy to get frustrated, isn't it? If you get a couple of those where you feel like you've won and they go against you, I would imagine that can quickly turn to a bit of frustration. So it's good to get back on the winning row, as it were. But Brad, did you catch any of the Cage Warriors Academy shows from last night, mate?
No, I didn't. I wasn't even sure if they were actually streaming live. I think the Southeast one was. I'm not sure if the Wales one was.
No, I think the Wales one's on. They're gonna put it on. I think later this week.
Yeah, it'll be on YouTube, I'd imagine. So yeah, I'm going to be looking forward to catching up during the week. I really wanted to go to the Southeast Academy show because it's only about 40 minutes from where I am, but just couldn't make it last night. So I'd actually planned to have a night off from combat sports completely after the Trilogy, and then the weekend before I did two events. So I've done like 5 events in 7 days. So I thought, what, I'll have a rest from combat sports. But obviously I ended up watching all the UFC and then staying up till 6 o'clock watching the boxing. I'm a violence pervert. I can't help myself.
It's non-stop, and it was absolutely non-stop. Let's talk a bit about the Trilogy, Brad, or the trilogies, as it were. Obviously, you called them all, but I mean, I thought we've talked about it over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, they came to an end. They're very special events in a strange time for the world, in a time as well where it looked like we weren't going to get any sport of any kind for a long time at one point. And I think like the likes of UFC and Cage Warriors, Premier League, they kind of saved us in terms of getting live sport up and running again. But what was it like as someone who was there, especially those earlier trilogies when you're just getting used to there being no fans and no roar of the crowd and things like that?
It was wild, man. Like it was weird enough just getting to the hotel for the first couple because, you know, this is the time where gyms are still closed, pubs are still closed, most people working from home. There was no socializing being done. So it was great in that respect to be in a situation where you can see people, you work with and, your friends in the industry and, just sit and have a chat, like catch up with people and stuff. So it was kind of amazing from that respect, but also hugely stressful having 3 sets of weigh-ins, 3 sets of fights, 3 sets of fighter arrivals, 3 sets of a full fight card and all the coaches to get through different airports. And, it's not an easy job putting an MMA event on at the best of times, especially one that's being broadcast around the world where you've got to tie all that together. So doing 3 in 3 days without any time to relax or decompress, it was pretty stressful. But I think we found the rhythm after a while. Like everyone knew what they were doing, little production things can get sorted. And, like for 18 months, it sort of just became, a bit of a way of life in terms of preparing and actually doing it. So this last one seemed to kind of fly by, even though it was the last one and you're thinking, oh, something's going to go wrong. It's the last one. It can't go smoothly. Everything seemed to go pretty well at least from where I was sat, and it seemed to come across pretty well on TV. And what I think the crazy thing's been about these trilogy series is there's not been one bad card. And I'm not just saying that as a Cage Warriors guy. Like, you look at the feedback online. I tweeted the other week, like, has there genuinely been a bad card? And really, there haven't even been many boring fights. Like,
I was going to say, I would argue there hasn't even been a bad fight, let alone a bad card. They just been non-stop bangers. And like a couple of times, Dan, we'll look at the cards for the week before, and we'll sort of give a couple of predictions and have a look at some of the fights. And you're looking at it, and it's like Thursday, oh, so-and-so's fighting. So, oh my God, that's going to be insane. Blah, blah, that's going to be banger. And then before you know it, that's just the first day. And you're going through, and every day even on the prelims, there would be at least a fight or something who's someone you'd be familiar with, or someone you know, or whatever it would be. There was always something of interest. But even there was a couple of guys who I wasn't familiar with, or a couple of fighters I hadn't seen before. But every fight was just, you couldn't take your eyes off it. And I think, as you said, the effort and the time and the commitment and the organization to put on a live show which goes around the world, and all the people who've got to be there, and got to be there at a certain time, got to do all the bits and pieces of timings and stuff, like, that's an insane production. But to do it over the 3 days makes it even more difficult to pull off. And I think the fact that it was so smooth and so enjoyable is a massive feather in the cap for Graham Boylan, for Cage Warriors as a whole. And like, Danny, I think your memory's as bad as mine, so we'll try. At first, I think it was the first Cage Warriors trilogy. We said, I think it was one of the latter 2 days, we felt like the general announcing or something, there was like something going on with the audio, or they're not off, like, particularly, it just didn't sound as good as normal. But then by the last trilogy, I was saying to Danny and texted him and stuff and saying, these guys are the best trio of, like, best combination of guys I think are in any promotion. Yes, you've got the guys like Cormier, or, like a few of the individual UFC analysts. But in terms of combination, I think you, Dan Hardy, and I've forgotten his name. I always Strauss. I think that's a phenomenal combination. I forget what the issue was, Danny, in one of the earlier shows. It wasn't like a glaring issue. There was just something I remember us talking about and just saying, "Oh, that wasn't."
So we had one show. I think it might have been the very first one without an audience. It was in Bowlers in Manchester, which is basically a big warehouse, and they do boxing and stuff there and conventions. But it's essentially a big empty warehouse in the middle of like an industrial estate, and they have these big fans that sort of extend out into the roof to sort of keep the building at room temperature.
Right, great.
So normally you've got sort of 2,000, 3,000 fans in there, and it masks the sound of the fans. But with it being empty, there was like a weird hum, and we couldn't figure out what it was. But the production guys were like checking all their machinery and stuff, kicking the computers and things, like trying to figure out what's going on with the sound. But then they realized it was these fans, so they were able to like pull them back. So we nearly caught the flu. It was absolutely freezing, but I think it's sort of the audio's issues out. So, swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm not just saying that because you're here. I said it, I think 2 weeks ago. Like, as a combination, I think it's the best trio around at the moment. And I think also that says a lot about Cage Warriors, Danny, as well. Just the standard of the announcing, the fights, the matchmaking. Not just the trilogies. The shows anyway are good, but like the trilogies has almost amplified it because you've got 3 days of constant fights. It almost amplifies how good each aspect of the show is.
Yeah, look, Cage Warriors is world class in every sense. It's got world class fighters, world class matchups. Matchmaker and Ian Dean does a fantastic job. Really, really does. Been around the MMA for many, many years, and he's really perfected his art. Then you've got the commentary, that was second to none, like we just mentioned. The refereeing is second to none. Okay, some mistakes naturally with the refereeing. They're really in a high pressured position, and generally we see most of the decisions going the way we expect them to. Again, it's not always going to be tasteful, depending on your opinions on the matches. But generally, look, they match any world stage, other promotions such as Bellator, UFC. Okay, UFC are real top of the tree, but I think cage warriors do bloody well. And yeah, to reiterate again, to be able to perform a trilogy time and time again as smoothly and with matchups galore, which are just great viewing. It's just impressive all round. So yeah, great. Cage warriors are really, I mean, it was a saviour, wasn't it? After all what we was going through with all the lockdowns and stuff, it was a real saviour.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was.
I mean, the only thing that kind of sucked for us was like we couldn't get any amateurs on, because we had to get government permission to run the events, and obviously it was, you know, the government has a definition of an elite athlete, and it's professional level or representing the country, and obviously there's no representing the country in MMA because there's no official governing body, so no amateurs, unfortunately. And but I think that was why the prelims were kind of so good, because I think a lot of those prelim fights would have ended up on the main card if we were doing an event every month, but because it was all kind of squished in. You got some really hot prelims as well. But yeah, it just came together really well. Like, obviously, I really appreciate your guys' kind words about the commentary and stuff. You know, I've not been working with Dan Strauss for very long before the trilogy started. Obviously, you know, with Josh moving over to America, and then all the travel issues with COVID, Dan was brought in, and then obviously Dan Hardy joined us, I think, one event into the sort of COVID era. I hate 3-man commentary booths. I'm really not a fan of them at all, so I was really knocked. But I thought, well, look, it's Dan Hardy. I get to work with like the best analyst in the game, so I'll keep my dummy in and not say anything about it. But it seemed to work really well. Like we just seem to click. You know, we all have a set role. We know when to speak. We know when to shut up. We know when to let the other guy speak, and it just seems to work really well. But we've got a great production team behind us, and as you say, Ian Dean, the best matchmaker in the sport for my money. The guy's an absolute legend. Doesn't get anywhere near enough credit. You know, won't stick his hand up to get credit. He's far too modest. So I'd like to give him a good old shout out whenever we can.
Yeah, 100%. But then you say about Dan, you mentioned like the UFC and Bellator and stuff. I would argue that yes, the UFC is like the top of the tree, but I still think before the trilogies, like often the Cage Warriors card would be, you know, good start to finish, whereas the UFC or Bellator, you'll have, you know, 2 or 3 great fights every week, but there'll also be a couple which you might be looking at your phone, or you'll get a bit distracted because it's not engaging. I do not get that particularly in these COVID era with the trilogy and stuff. There hasn't been a fight where I've taken my eyes off it for a second. Right. They've got a couple of questions for you, Brad, from the live chat. Danny, I'm going to ask you this question. I'm not going to ask it to Brad because I don't want to put him in the position, but I've got to ask it to you. Luke, I spoke to Luke earlier this week. Luke Shanks.
Oh, I know what's going on.
So we talked about it last week. He thinks that Sam Creasy tapped in the first round. Me and Danny talked about it a little bit last week, and I kind of said, I just don't. What I had seen of it, I didn't really see it as a tap. But Luke messaged me, and we were sort of chatting about it. And I can see his point of view. And then there was a video which came out yesterday, which Luke put out yesterday, and it does look a little bit like Sam tapped in that one, but it is so brief, and they kind of it happens, and then they're straight into another transition. That it's almost like, was he tapping, or was he kind of grabbing for something, or maneuvering himself? It's so difficult to see. What I will say is it's probably going to result in a rematch. But is there anything changed your mind, Dan, about whether you think it was a tap or whether it was?
I hadn't seen it. If you remember when we spoke about it, I hadn't seen it. I heard about it, and people umming and ahhing about the first angle that they had seen, but the one that I saw go up on Luke's Facebook, it was a clear tap. And Luke let go of it. And if you have a look at the result, I think it's Dan Movahedi that was refereeing the match. He even went in to stop it, but because it so quickly transitioned, he didn't step in. And again, I was saying, you know, mistakes are going to be made by the refs, and I just think it's such a difficult position they're in, and. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it, but to me, it was a tap. Now, in the heat of the moment, could Sam forget what happened in the scramble of the moment? Absolutely he can. He's under a lot of stress. you're in automatic pilot a lot of the time. It might have just been an instinctual tap, and then as it carried on, it quickly went out his head. It's like you have a dream, you wake up, and then you forget it within minutes. You just can't relay what the dream was, but you had a specific type of dream. It's funny how things work. And look, Sam is an absolutely honest man through and through. An incredible human being. Yes. And if he says I don't remember tapping, well, to me that is video evidence that he did. But he would not be lying if he said, look, I didn't remember doing it. I would absolutely believe that. But it's an unfortunate thing because it kind of does taint a little bit the victory. But there's also, give commendance to his performance overall. It still was a great fight that Sam put on, and it was a great finish. And it's just an unfortunate scenario, and it does leave things a little unsaid regards, well, what if? So it might have to be run by again. And as great individuals as both Luke are, although very, very different people, they would happily get it on again. But look, this is a little bit Luke's fault as well, a little bit, if you think about it, because it's for the ref to step in. If you punch someone and they go down and you carry on hitting them, this is for the ref to step in and stop it. You always carry on till the ref steps in. It's as simple as that. And
do you think he let go of it because they know because they're as friendly?
I think partially. Absolutely, I think partially.
He didn't want to hold it. Even if he had had that on Jake Hadley, he ain't letting go until the referee prizes him off. But because him and Sam have got a more amicable relationship, dare I say friends, it's like he didn't.
I think you're right.
Let go. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was all absolutely in the moment for both Sam and for Luke. I think you could see that Luke let go instantly, and Sam just carried on. Well, he was in automatic pilot, and but without a doubt, Luke let go of that, and he could have put it through. He had the leg over the head. He trapped his posture down, and even if he tried to retrieve the posture, because he had the head control with the leg, it would have brought his hips up as he tried to extend up to try and pull out. The armbar was on. There was a 2 clear tap response, and but I think you're right. If you think about Luke's demeanor in previous fights, he almost had hatred for some of his opponents, or such determination and utter disregard of what they previously have done great in their careers. He was there to win. With Sam and Luke was a little different. He had real respect for Sam. He knows what Sam is as a character. He knows what his capabilities are. And I think his brain switched into almost this mode that they're training like they have so many times at our gym. And when someone taps, you let go. And I think it was kind of that mentality that fell in, because the fact that they sparred so much together.
Well, I can tell you one thing. I can also announce that next week's guest is Sam Creasy. So we'll ask him.
Yeah. From my point of view, guys, because obviously I'm not going to speak for Dan or anything. Dan's a great referee.
Yes.
But there's a couple of points that I'd probably like to make. First one being, I didn't see it as it happened. Completely missed it. Dan Strauss, I think it was, after the fight had finished, said, I thought I saw him tap. I don't think we'd seen the replay by that point either. So I just had no point of reference for it on the broadcast. Obviously, I saw the video that Luke put up because he tagged me on Facebook the other day. So I did see it, and anyone who watches that can see clear as day. There's definitely a tap in motion. But one thing that we do have to take into consideration is that we've seen that on this this replay from a good angle. The referee was in motion. He was circling round during the scramble, and he sort of looked like he went to go in and then take a step back. And I guess the question going through the referee's mind at that time is, am I 100% certain that I did see it? And if the answer to that is no, you can't really intervene. And it's such a coin toss, because I could probably sit here and say, well, if you're 97% sure you did see it, then maybe you should intervene as well. But referees are under such pressure in the moment, in motion. It's not like we're in a situation whereby Sam was flat on his back with Luke in full mount and he's just switched out to a textbook armbar that everyone can see. It's in the middle of a scramble. And like you say, Danny, maybe it's a situation whereby they've trained together. They're used to feeling the tap and letting go. But look, this is a prize fight. It's a world title fight. And if you're in a scramble, maybe just give it that extra second. Obviously, no one wants to hurt anyone else, for the most part. So it's a tough one. As far as what happens, I've got no idea if Luke and his team have gone to Cage Warriors and said we want this reviewing. That would be for the Cage Warriors to decide. I think they will probably go to someone like Mark Goddard, who deals with like a lot of the regulatory stuff, and he would make a decision on that. I think one thing worth mentioning as well is that obviously Luke did miss weight for the title fight, so
yeah, this is true.
It's not like we've got the wrong guy as champion right now,
Yes.
because the belt would be vacant. And if the belt was vacant, then obviously you could have an instant rematch. So assuming that Luke is going to have another fight at 125 pounds, I would assume that's what they'll do. Whether Luke's team are going to move him up to 135 or whether the Cage Warriors are going to want him to go up to 135, that's obviously a discussion for those guys to have privately. But it's a shame because it was such a great story as well, seeing Sam get the belt on the third try. Don't see a guy like Luke lose either, who's has been there and lost it and he's coming back. But I get the feeling that this story's not quite over yet between these two guys.
No, and I think the other thing I would say is like how many fights per, we all watch a lot of combat sports. Like you do see in scrambles where people are kind of jostling for position and they're grappling and they're trying to move their arms and their hands, and sometimes they'll be sort of grabbing. And there's been times where I've been watching fights and I've just thought, did they just tap then? And it kind of goes by and it's gone. Like you don't want referees to stop every time that happens because you could have all sorts of mayhem. So I agree with you completely there, Brad. Like the referee has to be sure. And the fact that from the replay, and it's taken a few weeks to get a really good angle, good enough that we're all sort of saying, yeah, probably does look like a tap. The referee doesn't have that.
The camera lies as well, right? I mean, there was another instance on, I don't know if it was the same night or the night before, where it was the Adam Amara Singer fight, where it looked like a straight right hand, and then it clear as day looked like a punch to the eye. And then they got another angle of it in the production truck, and it looked clear as day a poke. And then they showed the first angle, and it looked clear as day a punch again. The angle that we see things at is hugely impactful, especially in the moment. And we don't all have the advantage of 6 different angles in a production truck and super slow motion and everything to make those decisions. Look, Dan Mulvaney's a great referee. He's
agreed. He is.
He's in the position he's in for a reason. Look, it's a mental sport. Sometimes mental things happen, but I'm like I say, I'm sure we'll see a final chapter in the Shanks and Creasy story.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, let's throw Brad some questions before we release him. But let's have a look what we've got. Let's have a look where they've gone. Rob Boyle says, sorry if this was asked last time you were on. What was your favourite bout that you've ever called, and what would be your dream fight to commentate on, past or present?
I think it might have changed since last time. The Paul Hughes Morgan Charrier fight from this trilogy. I mean, York Hall is a small venue, but it is perfect for fights because you've got the balconies and the atmosphere just comes over them like a waterfall. It's nuts. And that walkout from Morgan Charrier, where he just stopped at the entrance and just kind of like strutted back and forth in front of the Irish fans, and then he flipped the Irish fans off. And then you've got the French guys on one side, the Irish guys on the other. Everyone's going nuts. Paul Hughes then comes out and does the exact same thing, winding all the French guys up. And I think I said on commentary something like, this has been the most tense 10 minutes in Cage Warriors history, and we've not had a punch thrown yet. And then the fight was just ludicrous, right? Absolutely bananas. I still haven't watched it back on TV because I'm kind of trying to keep that sort of memory that I've got of it alive in my head. It was nuts. We were literally stood in the commentary booth by the end of it. We weren't sitting down anymore. To the very last bell that they were slinging leather. That for me is, I mean, you probably ask me on a different day and I'll change my mind again. But at the moment, certainly my kind of favorite experience. As for like a dream fight to commentate, I don't know. I don't really think about it that much. Like, one of my favorite things about Cage Warriors is that they throw fights up that you never would have thought about before, and then when you see them, you're like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like the Dominic Wooding Nathan Fletcher fight, I never would have thought after the last trilogy that we'd be seeing Wooding and Fletcher for the bantamweight title. But then as soon as I got the spreadsheet through with all the fights on, I was like, yeah, that's going to be a great fight, and it was. So I'm not going to kind of pick one that I'd like to see down the line, but I will say that I believe in Ian Dean, and I believe that he'll throw one up next year that's going to be just as good as Sharier Hughes, if not better.
Absolutely. Sharier Hughes is one of my favourite fights from all the trilogies. I think I prefer Sharier Vucinic only just, and I'm pretty sure that's because I'm slightly biased because I like Jordan. I know Jordan, so it's like that's maybe why. But like they were both just incredible fights.
Think about those featherweights though. There's literally a hair between them in ability. They've got slightly different skill sets. I'd say more Paul Hughes has a very similar skill set to Jordan, but between them, you keep repeatedly fighting them over 10 fights, man. There's going to be a toss-up on. They're probably going to win 5 out of the 10. They're so close. I just don't want to see them keep tripping each other up. But they fought each other now, and I'm
the UFC featherweight division.
I'm kind of worried that I want to keep wanting to rerun these. And like I say, it's just going to be on the night. I think that if they're going to face each other ever again, it'll have to be on new soil over at the UFC. Because that kind of performance deserves to be on a bigger stage with a bigger fight person. Not to take anything away from what Cage Warriors do. They set the platform for them to go on to the highest of levels. But I would like to see them perform against each other again on that platform. That'd be a fantastic.
100%, mate. And I think it says, Brad, a lot about the standard that you could drop all 3 of those featherweights into the UFC featherweight division, and it wouldn't be long before they were all right up there competing in the rankings and making a name for themselves, because all 3 of them are so talented and have shown that they can overcome a bit of adversity as well, as rather than just dominate fights.
Yeah, and again, like another one of the great things about Cage Warriors is you've got the sort of the guys behind them as well chasing the pack. So Steve Amable's right up there again in my estimation. He's putting a good run together. You've got Tobias Harilla, who's going to be back in December, who looked like an absolute machine before he ran into like William Gomez. I'm not sure if Gomez is going to be back on, but again, he's he could fight for the title, really, right? He's beat Harilla last time, so there's probably like 6 guys in that division where any matchup of any 6 of them could be a legitimate Cage Warriors title fight. But I agree with what Danny says. It'd be great to have seen. Morgan Charrier versus Paul Hughes on like UFC Paris or something like that. And I'm sure those guys will get there. But like you say, it's tough because, Morgan's lost, albeit very close fights in both situations. I believe it's a split decision.
Losing streak, isn't he?
And a situation whereby he had a point taken away from him against Hughes, which would have made the fight a draw, I believe. It was a majority decision. So ridiculously close, and like Danny says, if you keep running it back, they're probably going to come out with roughly the same number of wins and losses. So interested to see what happens in December. I think from talking to like Graham and Ian, they weren't expecting Jordan to be ready to go again as soon as December, but he obviously turned up to the Trilogy, looking to get it on. So hopefully we'll see him defend his title against either Paul Hughes or another challenger come December.
Yeah, 100%. I can't wait. Can't wait already. Right, Brad, we'll let you go, mate. I appreciate, as always, you joining us and giving us your time. And we always enjoy talking about Cage Warriors. I should mention, actually, very quickly, just before you go, Cage Warriors announced tonight, because we were all a bit deflated that the trilogies were gone. And they announced today, or yesterday it might have been, that the Double Trouble event is coming 11th and 10th of December, I think it was, or it might be the 11th and 12th.
They really should let me name these things. I come up with some better names. I retweeted it with a poster from Double Impact, the Van Damme movie. I thought that was better. I'm not the marketing guy, so what do I do?
But no, cheers, Brad. Appreciate it, mate. And I no doubt we'll get you on again very soon, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Take it easy. Enjoy the rest
of the
Brad.
Take care, buddy.
Cheers, mate. And on that note, we'll bring in Mr. Ben Doty is joining us once again. How are you, Ben? You all right, mate?
I'm good, Simon. Danny, hope you guys are good.
Yeah, you're Ben.
All good, mate. Lots and lots to talk about on the boxing front, my friend. That was an interesting evening of boxing, wasn't it?
It was, I mean, obviously I didn't watch the BT Sports show in the the UK primetime hours with Brad Foster, etc. But obviously, Cheeseman versus Williamson was a classic, a British title slugfest. It was a war, and you had Smith Fowler, which I wasn't too excited about ahead of time, which turned out to be a very dramatic, interesting fight where both of them looked on the verge of winning by stoppage at one point before Beefy nailed it. And then obviously, what can you say about that epic slugfest in Las Vegas last night? I pride myself in having a sense of perspective. I'm never one to go, to start foaming at the mouth over anything too recent. But at the same time, you've got to give credit where it's due. And I think it was one of the greatest heavyweight fights of the last 50 years, quite honestly.
Yeah.
It was sensational. And I think I said to Brad and Danny at the start of the show, I wasn't that excited about this fight 2 weeks ago. Like, it was just a fight which was coming up. I didn't feel like it was needed, particularly because the second fight, was so
inclusive.
That was it. Tyson Fury was better. He stopped him. There was no controversy, so it didn't seem needed. But fair play to Deontay Wilder. He didn't have to take this fight. He could have been paid off comfortably and sat at home. He took the fight, and I thought he came back. He turned up last night better than he had in the first two fights. I thought his game plan was better. I thought his performance was better. I thought everything about him was better until he refused to shake hands. But that's another story we'll discuss in a minute. But overall, I thought his performance in last night's fight was by far superior to the first two performances, which, is interesting, really, when in the first one he floored Tyson Fury in such a dramatic way. But just on Deontay Wilder, how did you feel? What did you think of his performance last night and the changes he made?
I think he showed massive cojones, like you say. I think he had this obsessive need to win that fight and was prepared to. I think he really was prepared. The controversy about Mark Boylan throwing the towel in last time, which I do think was the right decision, but you can see that it was going to take a brave cornerman in Wilder's team to throw the towel in last night. And he did get his wish that he wanted to go in his shield, and did he ever? But I thought game plan wise, you could see he came out with evidence of a game plan. I mean, he came for a start. He came in considerably heavier than he was in the first fight. Certainly, he was only about 215 for the first fight. He came in at 238 if memory serves at the weigh-in the day beforehand, Friday. And you can see, and I think the logic behind that was that they because obviously power and strength being different things, it's something I know Danny will understand. They wanted to make him a bit stronger and a bit more of an immovable object, so Fury couldn't push him around so much, although that did seem to be something Fury was ultimately capable of doing still. But the other thing was, technically he had a different approach. You see the way Wilder came out throwing body shots. He came out throwing jabs to the body and straight punches to the body. Because when I think body shots, I think of uppercuts and that left hook to the liver and the right hand, that short right hand under the heart and all that. But Wilder was jabbing to the body and also throwing long straight right hands to the body, which was a good shout because, when you've got an elusive guy who's capable of moving and he's got that upper body movement. Gil Clancy once said, the body doesn't move, it just stays there. The head moves all the time. So it looked like Malik Scott had done a pretty good job with whatever he'd been doing with Wilder and whatever they've been working on. And, I thought obviously then you got the knockdown in the third round, I believe, with Fury, 2 knockdowns in the third round, if memory serves. And it looked like Wilder's kind of purple patch was going to be short-lived. And then obviously he came to turn it around in the mid-rounds and nearly had Fury out of there. So I think it's one of the things that ultimately Tyson Fury is just a better fighter of those two. I do agree that the trilogy should be done now. The whole saga should be done. Fury says it is. And I think ultimately Fury, regardless of his size, is a better fighter, a more versatile fighter who's got more tools in the box. But Wilder, what it is, right, when you said you had no interest in it, and I think a lot of people didn't, particularly when it was initially announced that this was what the route that Fury was going to be forced to go down. I think the lesson we've learned from it, and even for me more than ever before, is the lesson learned in all these years of watching boxing, that just because a fight is completely conclusive and there seems very little intrigue or interest or point to or around a rematch, it still doesn't stop it from being a classic for the ages on a different day several months down the line. That you can't say that it's going to play out the same again. That you move a few a few variables around, whatever it is. And, even when Floyd Mayweather used to say, when he had 42 fights, and he used to say 42 came and 42 went. And I used to try and be clever and say, no, because you fought Castillo twice and you fought, Madonna twice. And then somebody said to me, no, 42 came because he fought them on a different day. And I think that proves the point. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think we've learned not to be too scathing. Like, okay, Joshua Usyk, some people might say, I don't see much point in a rematch, and same logic, but there's probably more point in a rematch than there appeared to be with Fury and Wilder, a third fight, right? So we've learned a lesson, I think, there.
100%. Yeah. I think, Danny, one of the things which sticks out for me about Tyson Fury is the man is 6'8", and the way he's able to move and be, like Ben just mentioned, he's so elusive for not just a heavyweight, because there's been heavyweights over the years who are quite light on their feet. They're smaller heavyweights as well. But when you think of like Mike Tyson, he was so quick. But Tyson Fury is just the way he is able to move, yet be 6'8" and whatever it was, 250 pounds, is quite incredible, because when you add that size and that elusiveness and his skill set with returns to boxing, it's quite the combination, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think he's 6'9". Every inch matters. Remember that.
I was going to say that if you didn't say it.
Yeah. I mean, a huge man, and physically, he doesn't look like he should be fast. I mean, he holds a lot of, extra baggage, if you will, around his midriff region. He really does not look athletic at all, but he seems to have cardio for days, and I think it's all down to efficiency of movement. Yeah, he's just well-coordinated guy, and for someone with that height, that's unusually, it's just unusual to see. It's just, you don't see that very often. But I think the only thing that can go against someone of that size is Fury sometimes looked like he was struggling to get up on time, just because he is such a big giant of a man. And one thing I wanted to ask you, Ben, do you feel like there is still some slow counting going on there? I mean, some of those seconds were drawn out, I think. And, is that just the way it's done in boxing, or is this just an optical illusion because it's been picked out before?
Do you know what? I think the count has become this big drawn out procedure, because if you notice in the first fight with the controversy around Fury's count, particularly in the last round, 12th round, when it looked like he'd been shot by a sniper rifle anyway, when he was on the deck, you see the referee, I think it was Jack Reese at the time for the first fight, and he was saying, a bit like the drunken driving test or something. It's a bit like, you walk forward, go on one leg, come to me, go backwards, back to you. And people were saying, where the hell's that rule come from? Is that? And they said, and everybody said, it's a new WBC rule. Yeah, it's just come out. And some people said, seems highly suspect to me. But then you saw Wilder getting the same benefit of that he was saying, and because what that guy, the referee, was doing, he would say, okay, walk to me, okay, walk back. Then he'd let him stand for a bit. Then he'd say, do you want to fight? He kept saying, because he had to say it a lot. There was 5 knockdowns. And he'd say, do you want to fight? And obviously they, in each case, but both of the fighters did put their gloves up, which is the sign you wish to continue. But I agree with you, Danny, that counts are taking forever these days. The point I would like to make is some people say that some people at home, they get a clock, like they look at the, let's say the Tyson Buster Douglas notorious long count scenario. They'll time it on their phones or whatever, and they'll set that, and they'll on YouTube, and they'll press pause, all the rest of it. What they don't, and they'll try and uphold, look, that was 11.5 seconds or whatever. But it's not in the rules of boxing. It is a 10 count, which is interpreted. It's not actually. Nobody ever said it has to be on a clock, so they're not at 10 actual seconds. They are told with a reasonable approximation of a second on the referee's fingers. The timekeeper takes up the count and hits the canvas. So they work together, but it doesn't actually say it has to be 10 actual seconds. And I think that's the problem. And I think with this new rule that they've got to get, because I don't know if you know, back in Jack Dempsey's day, initially, they just would, if once you knock somebody over once, you could stand over them, like a vulture, and wait for them to get up and hit them again in the act of rising.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And there was a controversy in one of Dempsey's fights, iconically called the Battle of the Long Count, his rematch with Gene Tunney in 1927, when they were suddenly implementing this neutral corner rule. And Dempsey was slow to react to it and wouldn't go to a neutral corner. A little bit like Muhammad Ali in the rematch with Sonny Liston and that controversy with Jersey Joe Walcott. And they always say it was Dempsey's. It was Dempsey's old habits die hard kind of behaviour, that he was just a killer who was going to lurk over a fallen foe and hit him again. In order to compensate for that, we seem to have gone to this procedure where we're almost giving people a Swedish massage before we put them back out there.
As always, Ben, I'm just in awe of your
How does he do it? So he flips. He'll flip off fighters and dates and who they was fighting on what round it was.
The names of the UFC.
No.
Sorry, I got a couple of questions from the live chat which I want to put to you, Ben, because they kind of fit in with something I'm going to ask as well. Now, I saw a lot of people saying on social media that Dillian White should be next in line for Tyson Fury. And then I also saw, and I just, so Craig has said in the live chat, the thing is with these two, they are the two best heavyweights around by quite some distance, in talking about Fury and Wilder. Now, for me, I think that I would put Usyk, and I would have probably put Usyk and Joshua before their fight, sort of alongside each other. I would put them ahead of Deontay Wilder. Do you think that, like, Wilder and Fury, is it widely accepted that they're the two best heavyweights around?
No, I don't think so. I think the way it will be seen now, post the Usyk Joshua result, is that the best two heavyweights in the world, Usyk and Fury, and they certainly own all the belts between them. With obviously that's 3/4 in Usyk's favour, the way the chips have fallen. And I think even if Joshua hadn't have lost to Usyk, if he'd have beaten Usyk, I think people will be looking at Fury and Joshua as the two premier heavyweights in the world and still trying to get those two together. So I think, as far as, I don't think Wilder is the second best heavyweight in the world. No, I think that has got to. I think Usyk will give Fury a lot of problems. I don't think it's a given that a lot of people seem to feel that Fury will beat Usyk after that because they just seem to be too strong, too dominant. And plus the fact Fury does seem to have something almost otherworldly about him, that he's just a winner and that he will do whatever he needs to do to win. I don't know if you picked up on the profane message he gave out the way, and I'm not going to say it now, but he said, did you hear about it? He said, no man from his mother's,
Oh, yeah, I got it, yeah, I remember that.
Could possibly overcome me in a bout of fisticuffsmanship or words to that effect, And he does almost seem to have that kind of mythical thing. Emmanuel Stewart, the legendary Kronk trainer once, he said, he was talking about Oscar De La Hoya, and he was talking about Ike Corte, that he was going to fight him. And he said that Corte, from a boxing perspective, should beat Oscar De La Hoya. But he said, but Oscar is a child of destiny, and he seems to have something protecting him. He said he's a child of destiny, and Muhammad Ali was one once, and you don't want to be messing with those. And I feel Tyson Fury really does appear to be a child of destiny, to use that term, even from his premature birth and the feeling that he wouldn't make it. He does appear to have this thing. I do believe in forces perhaps that we can't see, that affect our affairs and in combat sports, and everything else in life. And if anybody has got someone at his shoulder, striving him on, I think it's Tyson Fury, But for sure, I think Usyk. What I'm seeing in the last several hours on social media, a lot of people say, no, Fury is the man. Nobody beats that guy. Some people perhaps are going a bit overboard, talking about his greatness in the all-time scale off the back of it, the way people do, get emotional after a big fight like that. Understandable. But I think Usyk would still give him plenty of problems. I don't think that one's a given. So they're number 1 and 2 as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, like for me, when I look around all the heavyweights and I look at it and I think which one would trouble Fury the most, Usyk is the one I kind of land on every time, which just from his skill set and whatnot. Reese says, Ben, I've seen Tyson Fury claim that he is the best heavyweight of his era, which I assume he includes Prime Klitschko. Where would you rank him in the modern heavyweights? For Reese, he says Klitschko with Prime Klitschko is one of the best.
Well, see, it depends what your ranking criteria is. I mean, a lot of people tend to rank on who would beat who. Is this guy? Would this guy beat all the others? That means he's the greatest. But I think you've got the reason why that doesn't necessarily work, as logical as it sounds, is because sometimes one guy can beat this guy, but he can't beat that guy. But that guy can beat the guy who beat him. We've seen enough examples of that. So I think you have to base it on resume, particularly. It's a lot more reliable looking at the facts of what somebody did in their career than how they might have gone against somebody. Either had they fought them at all when they never did, or had they fought them in their prime when they actually fought them when they were a bit past it. It's still a hypothesis. The achievements are written in stone. So if you look at, I think Fury might be a better fighter than Vladimir Klitschko, and I certainly prefer him as a fighter and as a character and everything else. But Klitschko had 23 title defenses, I believe. Which is a Joe Louis level run. I know. I mean, I hate to mention him in that kind of company, but I think you have to say Klitschko's resume is better than Fury's because, Fury made his first defense of any World Heavyweight Championship last night. Before that, he beat Klitschko for the title. Then he had the problems and got sidelined. Initially announced his retirement, had the depression, drugs, etc. Then he came back, took on a couple of guys, and had the draw with Wilder. Then he had a few more fights on the road, and then he annihilated Wilder to win the WBC title last February. And now last night he's defended it, so he's made one defense. And how can I say he's a greater fighter than someone who made 23? I just can't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. Reese also said, where do you rank the Wilder Fury trilogy amongst some of the most famous ones? Ali Frazier, Ward Gatti. Reese lands on Ward Gatti himself. But is it an all-time great trilogy?
I think so. I think that fight alone, there's a guy called Frank Lotierzo who's a pretty good stateside pundit who's got a good following on Facebook and always makes good posts and discussion threads. And he said it's the best heavyweight fight since Foreman versus Lyle. George Foreman and Ron Lyle had a crazy kind of, rock'em sock'em, multiple knockdown tear up back in 1976. It was kind of Foreman's rehabilitative fight after losing to Ali, the Rumble in the Jungle, after a period of inactivity. And he was, it was the same thing, like 5 knockdowns, 2 to the loser, 3, 2 suffered by the loser, 3 suffered by the loser, 2 suffered by the winner. And that is always an archetype for heavyweight kind of give and take punch outs. Foreman Lyle is the iconic one probably. And, and he says he thinks it's the best heavyweight fight since Foreman Lyle. And you know what? I think it might have been even better last night for the simple reason we got more of it. You only got 5 rounds of Foreman Lyle, whereas you got 11 rounds last night. So, let's face it, the first fight, which I did attend in LA, was dramatic for the reasons that you mentioned earlier. The knockdowns, the count controversy, the draw controversy. That was a compelling fight. It wasn't action-packed except for the action, if you know what I mean. A lot of the rounds were quieter, more tepid than that. But the high drama in the rounds where something happened. The second fight wasn't competitive, so you can't say it was a great fight, but it was a great performance by Fury. And I just think that last fight last night, it just lifts anything up out of the doldrums in terms of its posterity and all-time ranking. So I'd say it's up there with like your Holyfield Bowe, because one of the Holyfield Bowe fights wasn't as good as wasn't as competitive as the others as well. So they had that. I would say it's on a par.
Good shout. I like it. In terms of there's an interesting one. Gaz says, in his opinion, you have more chance of seeing Fury versus Joshua than you do seeing Fury versus Usyk. Sadly, what do you guys think?
I make him probably right because the business is the business, and Fury versus Usyk, it's going to be an attractive fight to a lot of people who are really into boxing because it's the most meaningful matchup. And I think even to casual people, because casual fans in England, they've just seen what Usyk can do, and they've seen him, on a big stage in London. But it's still. You still might find to some people, as much as I'd rather see that fight, you're going to still find it's a huge, big box office attraction, particularly if Joshua can come back with an impressive win, maybe, let's say, not against Usyk. Suppose he decides to go another route. I still think it could, funnily enough, be a bigger fight, even though I prefer the Usyk one. So I think he's right. Gaz, I think you said that. I think they don't really... I don't think people want to make Fury versus Usyk as much as they want to make some other fights. The interested parties. So some people assume just because they were trying to make Fury Joshua so badly, now that Joshua's been beaten, some people automatically assume Usyk has inherited that position and he's going to be the beneficiary of that. But it just doesn't work that way. So I mean, I think he might be right when he says there's more of a chance of seeing the other fight.
Did I read? I'm just having a quick look now. Did I read that Eddie Hearn said that he is taking that rematch with Usyk? I'm sure I read he confirmed it, but I can't find it now.
Pretty much, it looks like that's what the route they want to go down. It looks like he's activated it. That's the terminology they use these days for the rematch clause.
And Fury said he'll train Joshua to beat Usyk for free. I thought that was just the sort of thing he comes out with, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know there's a few people who watch and listen who want to see Dillian White versus Tyson Fury. Is that something, Ben, which you'd like to see? Or is that something you think Dillian White deserves a shot at Fury? Do you think it's likely to happen?
I think it's very likely to happen because the WBC have mandated it. They said before the fight Saturday night, they said the winner will be obliged to accommodate Dillian White. He's been waiting since 1962 or whatever it is, you know. And I think, why not? It sounds like fun to me. I mean, I don't think Dillian White will beat Tyson Fury, but I don't see why he shouldn't be afforded the opportunity to have a go. He might do better than Wilder did last night. Maybe not as... He might not put him on the deck a couple of times, and it may not be as memorable, but he might be more competitive round in, round out, you know, with it, because I think Dillian is a bit of a better boxer than Deontay Wilder. He obviously doesn't have that same kind of power, but I think it's a viable fight between two big names. Dillian is a popular guy in the UK. I mean, he seems to have that kind of mystique that the fans like, you know, and I think... I mean, don't get me wrong, Dillian White has not been like some kind of Sonny Liston character who's been shut out in the cold forever. He was offered a world heavyweight title shot against Anthony Joshua in April 2019 when Baby Miller failed a drugs test. He was offered to come in there. He didn't like the terms, quite simply, so he said no. But if they'd have offered Sonny Liston a world title shot back in the 60s for Cab Fairholm and the introduction to the round card girl of his choice, I reckon he'd have took it, you know. So let's put it in context. Dillian White has had opportunities he's turned down as well, but he has played the WBC game for a long time. He's done what they've asked of him. They've kept putting hoops in his way. He's gone through them, and then he had the hiccup against Povetkin, as you know. Then he put that right, and he still hasn't had the title shot from that particular sanctioning body. I think it's about time he was awarded it, and they've said they're going to do it. I think Fury and White sounds like fun, even if you fancy Fury. So what I say, let's do it, because they're still going to have to sort out the other business with Joshua and Usyk, it would seem, while we wait for that. So best case scenario, we have Joshua, Usyk 2, Fury, White, and then we can move on from there. Well, I think we feel it would be Usyk versus Fury, but we're not sure.
Isn't Dillian White used to, supposed to be fighting Otto Wallin in October, I think.
I should have said it. Good point, Simon. Very good point. He is very soon. It's October 26th, I believe, if that is the Saturday night. What we on? We were just on the 9th.
Yeah,
it's what? 23rd, October 23rd. Does that make it?
30th, I think it is.
It's the 30th, okay. Yeah, October the 30th. Yeah. So, yeah, and you know what? Some people are saying don't write off Otto Wallin. He still has that obligation to take care of. The guy gave Tyson Fury a bit of a tussle, quite a torrid time. You know, obviously the cut afflicted Fury to a degree. But, you know, so Otto Wallin is going to be ambitious and he's going to want to spring an upset. So Dillian has to come through that first. And if he does, I quite like the Fury White fight, to be honest with you.
Interesting. Is there anything in particular which you think Dillian White has got in his toolbox which could give Tyson Fury trouble, other than the usual, you know, heavyweights, only takes a punch, etc.?
Unfortunately, Simon, no. I mean, this is the thing. I don't see what Dillian White has got to beat Tyson Fury with, because Fury's withstood bigger punches, you know, most notably last night, and on the other case he fought the guy. And you know, Fury is a versatile boxer. Fury's shown he's got a lot in his toolbox. He's a good inside fighter as well, Tyson Fury, as well as being able to bounce on his toes and to do the kind of stick and move thing. And he can be a bully and get on the front foot. You know, he is a very good versatile heavyweight, really, Tyson Fury. Whereas Dillian White, I think he's a couple of levels lower than a Tyson Fury. Dillian's got decent power. He hasn't got a granite chin, but he takes a shot. He's got a big heart. You know, got a fighting man's heart. He's a pretty good boxer, but I don't think there's anything particularly remarkable about Dillian, unfortunately. And I don't see what he's got to beat Tyson Fury with.
Interesting. Do you think there's any chance Tyson Fury retires?
He might do. I mean, he's not been the most active fella in the last several years, anyway. How
old is he? 38.
33.
He's only 33, but you.
Yeah.
But he seems to have taken a very long time to get to that age, is what I'm saying. I first saw him. I first laid eyes on him. I was doing my ABA Level 2 coaching course for the Repton Boxing Club. The training session for the kind of coaching session was 2 weekends at the Lim Boxing Club in Camberwell, very famous gym. You might have seen it in Snatch, where Brick Hop is saying, "You're a ruthless bastard." I'll give you that. That's the Lim Boxing Club. And there was an England squad training. There was a GB squad when Fury was staying amateur and George Groves was staying amateur too. There was a GB squad training session happening the same time that we were, as coaches, were up for our kind of what do you call it, the practical kind of session. And there was Tyson Fury with a big full head of curly hair. George Groves was there too. Bradley Skeet was about the only other name who amounted to anything that I remember being there. And then he looked old enough then. I mean, I know some people just do, but they don't always know how old travellers are, do they? People from the travelling community. There's perhaps a little bit more mystique attached to their kind of birthday than there might be to yours or mine or Danny's. Whatever. So it just seems like it's taken him a very long time to become 33. I swear to God. I mean, would he be a bit older, a couple of years older? Maybe.
I was amazed when I really just, and I'm not with any sort of educated guess. I just by the look of him, I thought he was,
Yeah, he looks older, but let's say he is 33. But I don't know. I mean, I think when you go through fights like last night, both of them will have left something in that ring, right?
Yeah, and he's had a lot of fights, haven't he? Heavyweight and
not by old standards, but I mean, Fury's had 31 fights now, right? Was it 32? Was he 30-0-1 last night? 30 wins.
32 in total.
Yeah, so he's had 32 fights, which is Joe Fraser had about that many, not many more than that, So that's a tough career. I think Fury has achieved an awful lot. He's made a hell of a lot of money, and he said he's not motivated by money, and I tend to believe him. So retirement would not be out of the question, but at the same time, I think he's also said, right, that he'll be a sad and lonely individual when he gives up boxing because he doesn't like anything else. He said, I box because I can, and I've tried anything else, and I can't find anything else I like. He said, I've tried, them kind of gypsy traveller pastimes like horsing and coursing and stuff, and he said, I've tried looking after animals and clay pigeon shooting. He said he tried, and nothing seems to give him that buzz. I know, quelle surprise. But so I suspect Fury might continue fighting because he needs it the same way. Yeah. Sugar Leonard told me once, I'm name dropping, but Sugar Leonard said to me, he said, I came back because I felt stable in the ring. That was the main thing. He said it wasn't about money. His comebacks, ill-advised, some people thought they were. He said, I came back because I felt stable in the ring and, I was unhappy.
I mean, you see so many athletes from various sports, but particularly in combat sports, they do suffer with issues after they finish their career, just because I think a lot of it is because when you've done something day in, day out, and it's been your life, you're dedicated to it every day for 20 years, 30 years, whatever it may be, and then suddenly someone decides, right, you're not doing that no more. Of course, it's going to be a big change and it's going to have an effect on you. So it is easy to see why athletes and fighters have some problems once their active careers are over.
And that applies to someone who might have had 20 fights and been Southern Area Bantamweight champion, or whatever.
Absolutely.
Or a journeyman who misses the people heckling him from the York Hall balcony. But how the hell do you replace what Fury has had? That feeling last night and the last few fights that he's had, getting chaired to the ring with wearing kind of ceremonial robes and a crown while Patsy Cline serenades the crowd, on your way. How do you, singing American Pie in the ring to all those thousands or millions of people, basically the audience of? How do you ever replace that in your life once that's gone?
No, I think you can't. I think even if he keeps fighting, it's like you can't replace those memories are there forever, aren't they? And I mean, I often forget that no one's ever beaten Tyson Fury. So whilst people will rightly say Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury is the better boxer, he's shown that, time and time again in the 3 fights. What you've got to understand is Deontay Wilder technically has come the closest to anybody in 32 fights of beating or overcoming Tyson Fury because he got
that. Everybody thinks that John McDermott beat him the first fight back in what would have been 2010, I believe. 2011. Everybody thinks John McDermott beat him, but in the rematch, Fury legitimately won it and stopped him. So he did put that right. But you know the same way people tell you that Floyd Mayweather lost to Jose Luis Castillo the first time. Everybody's convinced of that, and I'm trying to think of another example of it. But that's that kind of situation, Do
you think? Right. So I'll put another question to you then, Ben. We'll let Danny save his voice for a minute. Still. Is there any other heavyweights other than the ones we've mentioned, Dillian White, AJ, Usyk? Is there any other heavyweights which you look around at and you think, do you know what? I'd like to see them fight Tyson Fury, or they could give him a bit of a
Andy Ruiz,
answer him some questions. Do you think
Andy Ruiz on a good day?
On a good day,
yeah,
he's getting the good day, isn't it?
I think so, because obviously he had a hell of a good night against AJ during the first 2019, and then he's not the first guy to let that go to his head a little bit. He's suddenly had life-changing money. He's getting that adulation he's never had before, and he enjoyed himself, didn't he? He was eating,
Sorry, Ben, to interrupt you. What's he done since Andy Ruiz? I'm not.
He's had one fight against Chris Areola. It took him a long time. He switched to Canelo's trainer, Eddie Reynoso, who got him, supposedly was more serious about his condition, and got him training properly in the gym in a way that perhaps he hadn't quite given the same commitment to before. He did okay against Areola, but he didn't wow people, and he's been pretty quiet since, to be honest with you. There didn't seem to be a big buzz around Andy Ruiz, his career trajectory at the minute.
What, just to put it into perspective, maybe for people who weren't aware, like how much of an upset was that Anthony Joshua victory for Andy Ruiz? Like, was it, he could give him some, was it the equivalent of a Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury in this third fight, where you expect Fury to win, but he could do something if he catches him?
I think the Ruiz Joshua upset is up there with the greatest upsets in the history of the heavyweight division. I think it's up there with Cassius Clay versus Sonny Liston. They said Bear Braddock was a very big upset at the time, back in 1935. That would have been, But they, what else? Spinks versus Leon Spinks versus Muhammad Ali in February 1978. That was a big upset. Gene Tunney versus Jack Dempsey in 1926. That was a massive upset at the time. I think those are I think it's up there. AJ Ruiz is up there with it. Tyson Douglas is the one, isn't it? Buster Douglas versus Mike Tyson in Tokyo. I'm just going to show off now because I can see the reaction again. February 11th, 1990, in Tokyo Dome. That is probably the big one, because they've got that mythical situation where they said that the odds were 42-1. One particular sports book in Las Vegas was running a price of 42-1, which is crazy on a 2-horse race. So I'd say that one was bigger. But I think AJ Ruiz is in the top 5 greatest heavyweight upsets.
Yeah, it's not surprising it went to his head, is it? Really, I was just having a look at Andy Ruiz's kind of record, and like he hasn't lost very much. In fairness to him, I think he's only lost 3 fights in total, or 2 fights. Parker and Joshua. Yeah. So I mean, he's not. People maybe mistakenly kind of make him out to be a bit of a, for lack of a better term, a bit of a bum who got lucky. But I don't think, I think he's better than that. But he really shouldn't have troubled Joshua, but the stars aligned, and he did. But and one thing I will say just very quickly, I was reading Tyson Fury was very complimentary about Joshua's reaction to losing to Usyk, and that's something that we've talked about, Danny, a lot, isn't it, over the last couple of weeks? Is his reaction, the maturity he's shown, and just his general demeanor about how he behaves after a loss. Both when he lost to Ruiz, he was so complimentary to Andy Ruiz, and that it was, like Ben's just said, it was one of the biggest upsets of all time. He would have been devastated, fuming. He would have been annoyed with himself. He would have been upset. And then again, in the Usyk fight, arguably the biggest fight of his career, he came up short. Yesterday, we saw Tyson Fury, despite everything which has been said between the two of them, back and forth, he's been accused of cheating. After the fight and after he had knocked out Deontay Wilder, he went over to him a few minutes later and said, congratulations, respect, or whatever. Deontay Wilder told him to F off and was not interested. He said, no, I think I don't know the exact quote, but I don't
want to engage in any sportsmanship or respect, I think he said.
Yeah, no.
I don't want to show any sportsmanship or respect, which is such a bizarre thing to say in those terms. That's like what a writer describing it would say. He did not want to show any sportsmanship or respect.
Yeah.
You don't expect the first person to say, I don't wish to convey that. It's weird.
It is really weird. But I saw a clip where he sort of says F off and he didn't want to know, basically. And apparently I didn't see this, but because I sort of turned it off after the fight and then turned it back on a bit later. But apparently he got out the ring pretty quickly. But I think he went to hospital as well.
He did.
But like, Danny is a martial artist and a coach and a fighter. Like, how disappointed are you that after three very good fights, 2 exceptional fights probably, or 2 very good fights, one maybe a bit one-sided, but like, they've had a war overall between the two of them. Things have been said to build up the fight, as always. Were you disappointed that he couldn't just say, congratulations, and then walk off? Were you a bit disappointed by that, or did you?
Everyone's going to react differently, I guess. Some people, fight with the emotion, and the emotion's still running high after, and they're going to react like it. Sometimes they apologise the day later. I don't know. Maybe he's trying to create a storyline to have a fourth, pop at it. I don't know.
Please no.
No. I don't mean it's not going to happen, but it's straight after the fight. People are going to react certain ways. It's like Conor McGregor. He had his ankle broke. I think the worst timing for interviewing was straight after having your ankle, and he was behaving a bit disrespectfully. But the guy just broke his ankle. He's miffed off and he's being interviewed. I think that was a little bit nuts. So look, I think there has to be a certain code of conduct. I think throwing punches after the fight, that's a step too far. But a bit of verbal, it just goes to show how emotional he was about losing. He probably invests so much time and effort, blood, sweat, and tears to get the win that he felt that he could obviously get, and it was so close, knocking Fury down twice in one. He's so close, and it slipped away from him. Of course, he's frustrated. But do I agree with it? No, I don't. It's not what I would do. But we're all different, and it didn't push beyond to a point of disrespect. I think disrespect would have been like I say, throwing punches, pushing, shoving. Okay. I think had it went to that degree,
Zab Judah with the stool. Remember, Zab Judah hit the referee with the stool after he got the stool versus Kostya. So
I think I don't know. For me, like I agree with you. It's an emotional time, if you think, especially like really, a lot of people think it's the 3rd time he's lost to Fury, so he's going to be frustrated and he's emotional and stuff. It's kind of just one of those things. I don't know. I just thought especially because he had gone out on his shield and he had shown a different side to his personality in the actual fight, in terms of, as well as being a big puncher, he showed a bit of skill, but he'd also showed tremendous guts to get up after being knocked down. So it wasn't just about Fury getting up and going on to win, as it had been previously, or to get a draw. He'd got up and he'd shown balls, and then I felt like just maybe took the edge off a little bit. But
I think it probably did, and I think that's the there's a lot of people criticising Wilder today, but like Danny says, do you know what his trainer Malik Scott said? He said, well, the fact is, when Tyson came over to him, he said he views Tyson as a guy he's had these serious issues with based on allegations that have been made in the past that he's still holding on to, still believes in. And he said, so after what he found out in that moment, after they'd released all that energy, that he still felt the same way. That's what the coach described it as.
I guess, Ben, as well, is if you feel someone has cheated, it doesn't just go away, does it? After they've knocked you out, if anything, it was probably nerk you a bit more. But
what it might prove is that he means it, and he's not just trying it on as delusional as most people think he is on that score. That he actually believes it.
They checked Tyson Fury's gloves yesterday or Friday, didn't they? I believe I was watching a thing where they were explaining to his team about the horsehair and kind of all that side of it. But I forget who it was now. I was just going to have a look, but I can't remember. I can't think of the best way to Google it. But there was someone who was speaking on it and was explaining why the horsehair in the gloves, why they have a problem with it, the Wilder's team. Something to do with the way it moves and the gloves flex.
There is a technique known as skinning gloves. There is a way of doing it that way you can move the heading away from the knuckle part. Do you know what? I didn't know this when I first became a pro trainer, but everybody does it. In my experience, you get Don Charles, who used to train Derek Chisora, was the first one who showed me. He was in the dressing room. He had a fighter waiting to go in the ring. I can't remember who he was working with at the time, but it was backstage at some boxing show in London, a professional boxing show. and he had the gloves all messed up, and somebody was stamping on them. Then he scrunched them all up and then tied the laces in a tight knot when the glove was all mangled. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Fucking up the glove." He said, "You got to do that," and that's what you're doing. And ever since I'd see other trainers getting hold of the gloves and beating hell out of them, and then tying them up in a really, in a contorted position, so they were a little bit messed up by the time you put them on. And he said, and that's what they said. You've got to be a total rookie to walk in here and think you're just going to put these nice, shiny new gloves on him. You've got to mess them up a bit, and you've got to throw them around a bit. And that's what people do, And I do it just because everybody else did it.
So yeah, Craig says the horsehair can separate and it moves the padding around.
Yeah.
But they're approved by all the
right.
government bodies and whatever, governing bodies, should I say. Reese says, Ben, would you say we need another Super 6 tournament? We had one years ago.
Super middleweights.
For the super middleweights with some big names there, Ward and Froch, Kessler, etc.
I mean, I think that was a fantastic format in general, Reese. I think that's the way boxing ideally would function, because it's like a tournament, isn't it? That's the way a lot of sports tend to function, like tennis. And to the best of my knowledge of football, it kind of functions in that kind of way, that you progress and you move towards a cup final,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, they did the same kind of thing with the World Boxing Super Series that Callum Smith won a few years ago, but I think about 2018 that he won it. Might even be 2017, but we had it with Josh Taylor, who won the World Boxing Super Series at junior welter, which helped him unify some of his division before he went on to unify the whole thing. And I think in the heavyweights, the only reason why I'd say we don't necessarily need that in the heavyweight division now is because we've kind of been knocking off a few of those fights anyway, because Fury's beaten Wilder again, Usyk has beaten Joshua. So I think if we were going to do that in the heavyweight division, I think we needed to start it before those fights, really, ideally, for it to have that authenticity. But to do a Super 6 in every division, or a Super 8 even, where you start with a quarterfinal and go like that, like the prize fighter tournament format, but obviously drawn out over some months with the 12-round distance. I mean, I think that is ideally, that's the way boxing would always go, where the best fight the best. And if you've got a problem with fighting the best, then you better pull out and then let the next man come over. So if we could do things like that all the time, I think that would be fantastic. Yeah.
Well, funny enough, we talked about it on the last time you were on, Ben, a couple of weeks back. And me and Danny talk about it a lot. Is one of the things which I think puts off, particularly some MMA fans who like boxing, is the best don't always fight the best in boxing.
Yeah.
And that is a problem. And hopefully, I'd like to think that maybe because of the COVID era, maybe we all appreciate everything a bit more, and perhaps we'll start to see that more often. I guess we'll see when we see if we get like Fury versus AJ or Usyk. Really, that'll be that's kind of like the first question, isn't it? In terms of will those fights ever get made?
Yeah.
Gaz says Joe Joyce versus Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury. Would you be interested in that as a fight?
I think it's an interesting fight. I think Joyce is very, very strong. He's better than he looks, is the way I describe him, but he has his limitations. He does have his limitations. I can't see him troubling Fury, in all honesty. But AJ, an AJ that might be a little gun shy, as some people suggest he is, whose psyche might be a little bit uncertain at the minute. His mindset in general might be. I'm not saying it is. I think Joe Joyce is a danger man for someone like Joshua, isn't he? Because Joshua has his vulnerabilities, and we know he can be hit and hurt, and we've seen him get stopped. I think Fury versus Joyce would be like, master versus pupil, quite honestly. But I would have thought Joshua should be able to beat Joe Joyce. Really, they fought in the amateurs, and Joshua stopped him in a single round. That's a little known fact, actually. I only found that out recently. That was in something like the London finals. Novice. I think it might have been the novice championships. I know the fellow who refereed it, actually, because I put it on my Facebook. God, I never knew this happened, and I'm supposed to know everything. And he said, "Yeah, I refereed that one." So when they fought as amateurs, I'm not saying it has any meaning that Joshua won in quick time, but you would think that Joshua ought to be able to still be a level above Joe Joyce. But Joe Joyce is coming of age now. If he's not ready now, he's never going to be. He hasn't had a lot of fights, but he is already 36, I believe. Is he 36 already?
According to Wikipedia, yeah.
Yeah, 36, yeah. So, Joe Joyce can't have endless amounts of time, and I think he needs to, his team want to press him on quick and get him a world title shot. So, I think Like I say, AJ looks like he's going to go the Usyk route. If he loses again, what will he do after that? You know, I don't know, but I think that would be the time to discuss him versus versus Anthony Joshua. As far as Fury's next move goes, I would rather see him fight White than Joyce, personally.
I had someone tell me the other day, or someone sort of indicating to me that Joe Joyce is like the new young British heavyweight, and I was like, he's like 36, isn't he? Yeah. And because the way they were telling me was that he was like this sort of fresh up and comer in his early 20s and stuff. But I think, look, 36 is not that old, is it, for a boxer?
It's not as old as it used to be, quite simply.
No. I didn't realize he was quite so tall, actually, Joe Joyce. I knew he was a big boy and everything, but he's 6'6" himself. So you've got some really, really tall heavyweights in that division, isn't there?
Yeah, and he's well named the Juggernaut because he is like a juggernaut and he does keep walking through everything. He's phenomenally strong. He takes one hell of a good shot, and he's had to in his career because he's not exactly Pernell Whitaker defensively. And that's lasted Daniel Dubois like that because he was just a tougher, stronger guy, And I thought that would happen with that fight because I thought Dubois is more skilled than Joyce and more going for him in certain ways. But I thought that Joyce would have been the last man standing, and perhaps he could even be the last man standing against Anthony Joshua. I wouldn't put it beyond him, but not with Tyson Fury though.
Interesting stuff. I just having a quick look, see if there's any more questions before we release you, Ben, and me and Daniel just finish off on some UFC. Oh, that's quite a good one. Gaz says, Ben, who's got the best chin you've ever seen?
But it's hard to judge, isn't it? Because it's relative. But the greatest chins in history by consensus, and I agree with some of these choices. Everybody talks about George Chuvalo, the Canadian heavyweight, who fought Liston, and George Foreman, obviously fought Muhammad Ali a couple of times. Nobody ever put a dent in Big George. He had one hell of a chin. He was the quintessential kind of North American tough man kind of character. Marvin Hagler had one hell of a chin. He only ever suffered one knockdown his whole career, and that was when he got pulled over really by Juan Roldan. It wasn't really a legitimate knockdown, but it stands technically speaking. So Hagler had one.
Would you only count knockouts as going against that in terms of a chin, or would you count knockdowns as well?
Well, I think if you've never been even knocked down and never been knocked off your feet, it's further kind of a testimony to your chin, isn't it? Because I think some people say someone's got a good chin because they get up off the deck, but I think that can be true, but that's more recuperative as a heart for me. I think heart gets you off the deck. I think chin stops you going there in the first place in extreme cases. Jake LaMotta had a great chin, obviously. Some people believe that he was never floored. That's not actually true. He was floored at light heavyweight late in his career by Danny Nardico after his heyday. So he did take account, Jake LaMotta. Who else? You know what they say? Oliver McCall, who knocked out Lennox Lewis sensationally in 1994. He seemed to be impervious to punishment. Rocky Marciano would certainly be up there. Jack Dempsey had one hell of a chin. Very quickly, he says Fury's chin has to be up there too. They don't talk about him that way, to be honest with you, Gaz, because I do think he's got a great chin and he's obviously got, balls the size of the Soviet army. But he's been floored by a cruiserweight in Steve Cunningham. So you know what? As soon as I say that, Muhammad Ali is thought to have one of the greatest, most durable chins in the history of the division, and he was floored by Henry Cooper, who was little more than a cruiserweight. So that you're always going to get these caveats. But I would say that the ones that come up time and time again are Chuvalo, Randall Cobb, another one who went 15 rounds with Larry Holmes. Do you know Howard Cosell, the famous American broadcaster, quit boxing that night? He was so sickened by the spectacle of this guy just taking, licks after licks for 15 rounds. And Howard Cosell, Tex Cobb himself said, getting Howard Cosell to quit boxing is my greatest contribution to humanity until I find a cure for cancer. He said, if I thought he'd stop commentating on football, I'd play that for a week too. He said, because he wasn't always the most popular guy, Howie. So Randall Cobb, Marvin Hagler, George Chuvalo, Oliver McCall. I throw in Muhammad Ali too. I'm going to throw him in instead of Fury.
My buddy just texted me as well and asked if would you have Joe Calzaghe in there? Obviously, he never lost.
Joe, what, chin?
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe could take a shot. Once again, he got floored by Byron Mitchell and by Roy Jones and Bernard Hopkins, but he was never he was right there, wasn't he? I mean, Joe could seriously take a shot. Joe was a damn good fighter. You know, Joe had hand speed like crazy. You know, incredible engine, good skills, slick guy, clever guy, great boxing IQ, obsessive will to win. Joe did have a great chin. He had a great heart. He got off the deck to win fights. 46-0. I mean, Joe is an all-time great. Some people, I think Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank, they are domestic greats. Joe Calzaghe is an all-time great. I would make that distinction. You know, chin maybe, maybe.
Good stuff. Great stuff. As always, Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you join us and wrap up the boxing. And I enjoy it because like you're able to give a lot more detail and analysis and obviously got the historic aspect of it, rather than me and Danny who can.
It makes us feel like amateurs.
Well, the thing is, that's why I like having Ben on, though, isn't it? Because he gives an expert analysis on boxing.
It's the way that you not only quote names that I sometimes have to go and look up. I mean, obviously they're greats in boxing. I'm not as specialised as you are. I've heard of a lot of names, but so you come up with some names that I have to go back afterwards and have a little research on. But then you give the dates of the fight, how many rounds it went. You even given the bettings.
But do you know what the thing is, Danny? There are a few people who are even better than me, and I didn't think there was at one point. But in social media, I met them. There's a few guys. A guy called Henry Hescup from out of lives somewhere like New Jersey in the States. He's just frighteningly good. Just on the facts and figures, when you talk about that kind of data, there's a few of the Americans are really, really good, and they've studied the old newspaper sources verbatim, and they're just frighteningly good. So I'm pretty good, but there's always a couple that you're like, my God, that's gargantuan. You know.
Right, Ben, just before I let you go, one more question, which I just been sent is there any British boxer outside of the big names who you are genuinely excited to see what they can do over the coming years?
Like a top prospect kind of thing?
Yeah.
Do you know what? Well, everybody was talking about that. Was it Peter McGrail or Danny? It was McGrail who was the one who made his debut last night, and Eddie Hearn was really talking him up, and they've called him the Scouse Lomachenko or something like that. I mean, this is a bit of a dead end, by the way, red herring, because I didn't see him. I missed that last night. I missed his fight. I was watching the rest of the show, but I'll be interested to have a look at him to see if he's as good as Eddie Hearn certainly has been saying he is. Who else? I mean, I've thought Troy Williamson for a while was destined for good things, but I suppose his coming out party was last night. I'm trying to give you somebody that you don't know already that I could say I told you so later. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to think who I would. You got an idea? My girlfriend's got an idea. No. So it turns out she was just joking, and it wasn't something you'd seriously say on a show. Not really a serious box, it turns out. But I'm trying to think. You know, I remember they asked this question years ago, and you know what? Steve Bunt said Dillian White. He gave the name, and he was still an amateur. He said, "There's an amateur kid called Dillian White. He's my tip for the top or thereabouts." And I'm trying to think of an equivalent guy I've seen who really blows me away, and I can't come up with one right now. I think, like I say, I'll be interested to see what this McGrail's like. I'm going to check him out. What I missed last night.
Yeah, I'm going to watch that fight. Actually, that's on my list of fights from last night to watch. Ben, is there some sort of issue between Steve Bunt and Tyson Fury? Did you see their interview on BT Sport in the ring afterwards?
I saw bits.
It was really weird. Like Tyson Fury looked like he did not want to speak to him. He was giving him kind of one word or quite abrupt answers.
Fury can be difficult, you know. I mean, I've always felt, I don't know if he knows who I am or not, because I've seen him a bunch of times. I've interviewed him just the once, but I've seen him around because I do the journalist bit and the training bit. Sometimes I've been on that side of one side of the fence, sometimes I'll be on the other, and I've bumped into him because of that. I've even been in the corner against his cousin Huey at the Westcroft Leisure Centre. Do you know what? That was actually it was very. I was wondering, it's getting around to the anniversary of that several years ago when that happened, and I remember having a chat with him briefly at the Westcroft Leisure Centre. But Fury can be standoffish, and he can be truculent with his answers. I think he's that kind of character. I'll give you an example. Somebody, the day I interviewed him, one of the broadsheets was interviewing before I did, and it was a guy, like middle class white English guy who coming from a certain position that wasn't very similar to Fury's background, and he said, "So you were a traveller, yeah?" And he went, "Yes, that's correct." And he said, "So were you traveling as a child?" He said, "No, I never travelled anywhere." And he's enjoying the fact this guy hasn't got a clue because he doesn't realise what a traveller is. He thinks, well, you must just be travelling then, like a travelling circus. That must be what it's about. I'm sure he was just being deliberately quite monosyllabic and no, I didn't. Yes, I am, but no, we didn't. And I think, I don't know, I've not heard anything about him and Fury. The best person to get that gossip off would be Barry Jones. He would know if there's any problem with Tyson Fury or Steve Bunce.
It was just so... it was just bizarre because it was obviously, Tyson Fury was elated with his performance, his victory. The crowd was going nuts. And it just seemed strange that when the BT guy, which is obviously the British broadcaster, with the live rights and stuff, there just seemed to be something there as if they did not like each other. And I just wondered if there was anything behind it. That was all.
I'll look into it for sure.
Good man.
Might find something.
Right, Ben, thank you very much, mate. I'm sure we'll see you very soon.
Anytime.
But, as always, mate.
Awesome, Ben.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers, Ben.
Cheers, Ben.
Top stuff. Always a pleasure, mate. It's remarkable, mate. I really enjoy
it is.
Talk.
Retaining that much info is impressive. Really
it's incredible, mate. Right. Your quest now, Danny, is to wrap up last night's UFC in 10 minutes. Can you? Yeah. Are you up to the challenge?
Let's do it. I can.
But, so we're just going to very quickly, 10 minutes. We're not going to necessarily go bit by bit. We're just going to talk about the show generally. Was there anything on the prelims? Not really. We'll leave the prelims tonight. I think the first fight on the main card was actually my favorite, which was Maria Agapova versus Sabina Mazo. Really enjoyed this fight with Agapova picking up the victory. Rear naked choke, 53 seconds of round 3. Loved it.
Yeah, I mean, Mazo come out really stalking, was really pushing Agapova on the outer fringes. I think kind of hoping that she'll push Agapova into complete trade-offs and come in unstuck. But Agapova, what she kept doing was footworking around the outer fringes of the cage, but stopping and countering really hard. And she kept landing that cross left that was really causing problems for Mazo. And as time went on, as those strikes started to accumulate, they started getting cleaner and cleaner because she was finding her range, and Mazo was coming in more square, more static with the head position. And it was a matter of time, I think, before one of them took full effect and knocked her off her feet. And as she did, she went down, hands to the mat, face down, giving up that rear naked choke position. It was typical Agapova style, wasn't it? As soon as that opportunity come for a finish, she jumped on it. She literally just jumped on her back and sunk in the choke. And I think Mazo had kind of had enough after that impactful strike that knocked her down. Really impressive by Agapova. Nice to see that she's controlling that pace a little bit and looked a little bit more seasoned and more tactical.
Well, the first thing I thought of, and funny enough, that was the first thing you said to me before we started on the air, was she was less wild than she was in the previous fight. And I felt like the finish, the first thing I thought of when you said that was the finish where she punches her and she falls like on all fours. I feel like before she would have dived in to finish her with strikes. But this time she took a second and jumped on her back and just tapped her out. And I feel like that's an improvement in itself.
Making better decisions, Yeah,
definitely. Reese, that question about the Olympics and the boxing, what we'll do, mate, is I'll save that until Ben's on, because Ben will be back on in a few weeks, I'm sure, whenever there's next some big boxing and stuff on. And Aidan, I'll come to your question in a minute. Then we had Nicola versus Tim Elliott. I was looking forward to this one.
Yeah, strange sort of. I mean, Tim Elliott does have a strange style about it, but he's hopping forward with that lead leg, which is something I used to see, funny enough, back in my taekwondo days. When you lift your knee up like that and shuffle forward, you call that chambering your knee, because you never know whether it's going to be a jumping kick to make an invisible platform with that leg and kick with the other leg, or indeed fire at, say, a teep or a side kick with that chambered up lead leg. Really unusual style, but it actually caused problems, didn't it, for Nikolai? But Nikolai did start sitting down on some of his shots and finding some counters and started finding answers. But yeah, just a weird sort of matchup. I think they both struggled to fathom each other out. And Tim Elliott was obviously doing some unusual stuff out the box sort of tactics that got him some sort of success, but those successes become less and less as time went on. Yeah, it was a strange fight. That's all I can say about it. A kind of good performance for both. They both did some good things, but I think stylistically, they just caused issues with each other to be proactive and successful with anything major.
Yeah, it wasn't great. It was okay. It was enjoyable, I would say, to watch, but like it wasn't like back and forth excitement. It was like you said, they couldn't quite work each other out. Nicolau beat so number 11 Mateus Nicolau defeated number 9 ranked Tim Elliott via unanimous decision, and I think he deserved that as well. Probably.
Yeah, it was kind of close. I didn't know how they was going to score it myself. I was kind of like, because it was such a strange sort of fight. It was hard to know how they was going to score it. It could have gone either or way as far as I was concerned. I just don't know how they would score it, but it is what it is. Yeah, it could have gone either way as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, next.
Randy Brown defeated Jared Gooden in a unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board.
Yeah, this is another prediction I got right, because we don't really go over the predictions that we do where I'm getting them right. And I've got Agapova right. I've got this one right. Look, but both of them are incredible athletes. I really rate them both. And it's actually a hard one to pick. But what impressed me about Randy Brown is that he either broke his toe, foot, or dislocated his toes, that he done something with his foot. And they was confused at where it might have happened. I think it actually happened with his foot on the mat. And he's gone to do a punch or a kick, and I think he spread his toes. Because what people got to understand is on some of those certain canvases, they have like stickers on top, and have a different. And sometimes they can either be sticky or slippery. And I think he parted his toes and maybe dislocated a toe or broke it. So he's fighting with that difficulty. Then Gooden was doing a good job at hacking the legs of Brown, which I think he should have been doing, because Randy Brown had that sharpness, that extra height and length and speed, and was really peppering Gooden up. But Gooden's athleticism, wow, he really come back at Randy Brown. But Randy Brown was just a standout for me. He hit him with some really diverse combinations, really creative, and the fact that he was going through so much discomfort with that foot that was troubling him, and those leg kicks were beginning to hurt. I think he would have shuffled out of those leg kicks a lot more had he not hurt his foot. I think the only reason Gooden had those successes was because of that sort of like difficulty he had. He was sort of like fighting on one foot pretty much. Randy Brown, really excited to see what this guy's going to do in the future. I think he's going to be a standout in the next 2 years.
Yeah, spot on it. Their main event then was Marina Rodriguez versus Mackenzie Dern. You were looking forward to this one, did it?
I was,
Disappoint.
No, as a performance for visual, it was great. My sort of heart was with Mackenzie Dern. I love watching her jiu-jitsu. I've loved seeing how her striking has been developing. But as much as her striking has been developing, it works against other girls that also have been developing their striking and don't have a heavy background. But when she's up against Rodriguez, she made the anxiety of the striking really show. She started windmilling some of her shots, and therefore it made her shoot gape. Or she was shooting too far out. She really showed her hands. She basically gave her a postcard saying, I'm shooting in 10 seconds time. Here it comes. And Rodriguez was easily nullifying it on numerous occasions. That said, Dern did get it to the ground. And when she was on the ground, she was getting very, very effective, very, very quickly, but all too late in the round. I feel like Mackenzie Dern just didn't have enough urgency for my money. Whether she was worried about going this 5 rounds distance and perhaps was trying to reserve to get through the whole 5 rounds, I don't know, but to me, she just didn't look urgent enough for the takedown early enough in the rounds. I think if she wanted recipe for success, she should have been pushing for that takedown, with 2 minutes plus remaining on any of those round countdowns, but she didn't do it, left it too late.
Yeah, I called this one, by the way, just saying.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
But Rodriguez is good. I really impressed with her. Mackenzie Dern, I thought, performed pretty well. Just certain things probably got her unstuck this time around. Sometimes you lose to the better fighter on the day, mate. As you know,
Rodriguez looked good. She looked really good. Look, she was doing those horrible knee stomps as well, the oblique kicks, and it's only because Mackenzie Dern has learned her striking quite well in terms of MMA style striking, where she had a protected knee line, something that ended up getting Modestas injured. He had a turned off knee. something that I have picked up on about his style that I said is going to become an issue for him. She did have a front-facing knee, was able to slip a lot of them or receive them positively and not negatively. But any one of those could have gone wrong for Mackenzie Dern. So that was another really good tactic to stop Mackenzie Dern being able to come in with the hands and get the shoot. It made her shoot that little further out. And I kind of see those oblique kicks as like stop kicks. It kind of stops a good striker or a good wrestler in their tracks. And it makes them shoot or try to come in with their strikes a little further out. And it kind of gives away their game plan. As soon as they think of one. So fair play to Rodriguez. She impressed me. She really did.
Good stuff, mate.
Did we miss a fight as well? Wasn't the other one on the main card, that Corrales? Wasn't that Corrales versus Gutierrez?
No, that was on the prelims a bit.
It was on prelims.
You could talk about it if you watched it. I didn't watch it. So
yeah, it was another good fight. It was another one of those ones where it was so hard to judge who was winning. And this was,
There's a weird scorecards, 30-27, 29-28, 30-27.
Yeah, it was so hard to judge. Honestly, each judge, I'm not surprised, scored it differently because they were so diversely different in any successes that they had, which was actually very little. They were both struggling with each other, like the other fight that we spoke about just now, that their styles just seemed to cancel each other out. Corrales was struggling with the shoot and entry, kept getting double under pummeled, so he's getting a lot of his entries spoiled. He did get Gutierrez down briefly, but no one had any huge success on each other. It was another difficult one, but so fast as well. At that sort of weight division, they're so rapid, aren't they? It's hard to keep count of what is and what isn't happening. It's almost like to score something like this, you have to sort of watch it back again, maybe in slow-mo. But yeah, it was another good, interesting fight.
Yeah, good stuff, mate. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm not going to do the card, but next week, Shariah Eubanks is on the prelims, and then on the main card, Aspen Ladd is fighting Norma DuPont.
I'll go Aspen on that one.
Arlovsky's fighting. And,
I'm going to go Arlovsky.
Jim Miller's fighting as well.
I'm going to go Jim Miller. They're the one. They're my pick for next week.
A few good fights, and then of course in a couple of weeks we got Paulo Costa versus Marvin Vettori, which is going to be exceptional. And I'm pretty sure we might see. So on that Saturday the 23rd of October, so not next week, the week after, Mason Jones is fighting on the prelims against Alan Patrick, and Chris Moutinho is fighting on the same prelims versus Aaron Phillips. So the prelims on that day in 2 weeks' time is going to be special, with a main event of Paulo Costa and Marvin Vettori. So that's going to be, what a day. Can't wait to see Mason fighting again. Right. That's us done for the day.
Done. Another week. Good week.
Not too bad at all. Really enjoyed it. Big thanks to Brad Wharton, Cage Warriors commentator, and of course, A.C.E Podcast Nation boxing pundit Ben Doughty, as always, for his knowledge, and of course, former Cage Warriors world champion and legend of the MMA world, Mr. Danny Batten. Nice one, buddy.
Yeah, cheers, Si.
We'll be back next week with Cage Warriors flyweight champion Sam Creasy, and we will ask the question: did he tap out?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The champion, welcome, Danny Batten.
Yeah.